This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Hello, world, and welcome to episode 221 of a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. And today's sponsor is A2 Hosting. I've been using A2 Hosting solid state hosting solutions for our website at geekleader.com for many, many years now, and absolutely love their support, their service, and all the features that you get. You get access to cPanel. You get all of the things that you can imagine for a great WordPress experience, including their A2 optimized WordPress, which does extra security checks, extra lockdown. You can lock down your editor file so you can't edit anything inside there. You get alerts whenever there are file changes that are done. You can also do automatic updates, backups, and more with A2 Hosting. So highly recommend it. Go to geekleader.com/A2 to get more information and to sign up for their solid state turbocharged speed hosting today. Again, that's at geekleader.com/A2. All right, Geek Leaders. Today on the show, I have Angie Morgan, and she is a former United States Marine who is the author of a book called Spark that we're going to be talking about today. But she's also the author of a book called Leading from the Front, and started her own business, LeadStar. So we got a lot of leadership stuff to talk about today. With all that being said, Angie, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, John, for having me. It's great to be here.
First thing I want to say is thank you for your service in the military. I always, whenever I have a military person on, whether it's a Navy SEAL, whether it's somebody from the Marines, whether it's an Army vet, I want to say thank you for your service. It's really important to me. My dad was in the Army, so all that stuff kind of hits home a little bit.
Well, I should say thank you for my service because I had a great time in the military, and taxpayers, thank you. You sent me to Hawaii to live 3 years, so whatever I could do to return the favor. Believe me, it was worth it.
So if you don't mind telling people listening how you got to where you are today, what that time in Hawaii was like, and kind of what you're doing now.
Yeah, well, actually, thinking of Hawaii, I left active duty from there and transitioned to the West Coast and started working in pharmaceutical sales. And during that time in my career, what was notable was how the term leadership was being used. It was used very differently than during my time in uniform. When you go through the Marine
Mhm.
Corps, you learn that leadership isn't a job title. Everyone leads. Everybody learns the exact same leadership principles, troop leading expectations, and along those same lines, um, you think about it as a verb. Even if you're just leading yourself, everyone aspires to lead. And then I started working in the private sector in pharmaceutical sales. When we talked about leadership, we were referring to people in management positions, which is more like a noun. And you
Mhm.
really only led if you had the job title. And that got me thinking, and certainly with my business partner, Courtney Lynch, her thinking as well. We served together in the Marine Corps. That what if we were to share how we learned about leadership with the private sector? What type of impact would that be? What would it be like if everybody learned how to lead and aspired to lead? What would that look like for businesses if organization wide people demonstrated leadership? Again, even if it was just leading yourself. And so that sent us on our journey. We started our company in 2004 and have been in the speaking, training and development and coaching space since.
Awesome. So yeah, I found that a lot of times in business they talk about a leadership position, which is more of like a job title or a management type role. But in reality, you can lead from any level, and you probably should lead from any level if you want to be effective at your job. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Absolutely. I like to think about leadership in three different domains. There's
Mhm.
things that you need to do to lead yourself. And those are skills like time management, taking initiative, accepting responsibility, being accountable, building trust with your colleagues. Then, when you promote to more of a managerial role, suddenly you're a people leader, quote unquote. And so those skills are like, confronting problem employees or dealing with difficult people, um, coaching and developing your team, seeing your success through other people. And then, of course, you rise to that next level where you're starting to manage managers and be more responsible for enterprise wide, skills like strategy and change management and or even more like diversity, equity and inclusion, other skills competencies. So there's a host of skills related to leadership that you could be, or I would argue should be, leading throughout your career. So when you get to the top, you have this really robust demonstration of leadership ability.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that when you talk about going to the top and building those steps up, what is the first kind of skill that you need? I know in your book you talk about how you have to start to trust yourself. You have to learn to trust yourself before you can, kind of build those skills. Is that one of the first things we need to work on, or to lead ourselves, or where should we really begin if we're brand new at this concept? We're just now hearing about it, and we know that that's something we need to do. We feel we need to do it, but we don't know where to start.
Yeah, I like how you phrase that, just kind of where to begin, where to start. And I think the most important relationship any leader has is the one with themselves. So it does require, even though we tend to think, right, a leader has followers, but how
Yeah.
are people going to follow you if they don't trust you? And how are you going to be trustworthy if you can't trust yourself? So turn inward, build your self-awareness, understand your strengths, your weaknesses, your limitations, your motivations, all those things. And when we started writing Spark, one of the very first things that we did was start with really those intrapersonal leadership skills,
Mhm.
meaning beginning with character. You need to know you. You need to know what you value. Those are going to help make your decisions. Those are going to help give you directions. Those are going to help you achieve your own expectations for yourself. So you have to lead your life first. And then throughout the book, we go more into skills and competencies connected to others. But if you're, again, where to start, turning inward, really thinking about you and valuing you as a leader and all the strengths and skills that you bring to the table.
So, what are some exercises we can do to build that self awareness? I know for me, it was, I always saw myself in one light, and that's probably not the same light that other people saw myself. When I was first becoming a manager and I had high turnover, I was not a good boss. I really just wanted to get projects done. I could care less about the people that I was working with at the time, and I assumed everybody thought that I was a good manager because we were checking those projects off the list. And I didn't realize the fact that I was ignoring people's unhappiness. I was ignoring the fact that some people had things going on in their personal lives, and all that was didn't matter because we need to get this project done. And I didn't have that self awareness until I got a mentor. But what are some things that we can do to kind of look inward and have that reflection on us so we can get that self awareness?
Yeah, that self candor is really great, right? As well as self confrontation when you start to see that maybe, right, maybe things aren't going exactly the way that you think they're going. And that's great segue into thinking about, um, the different ways that we can see ourselves and the information that can avail itself to us to help us demonstrate self awareness. We tend to think about self awareness only as what we know about ourselves, but that's kind of limited because other people have keys to information that could help us get better. So I think it starts from, a period of reflection. And through Spark, we have on this website, sparkslead.us. So
Mhm.
sparkslead.us, you can download a few self-reflection exercises to think about your strengths, to think about your values. But then there's also inviting feedback from other people to help evaluate if you're seeing yourself correctly. You've probably worked around people who thought they knew themselves, but you really working with them saw something very different than what they saw. It's like the person who says, I've got an open door policy. And you're like, well, yeah, your door is certainly open, but your mind might not be open. So if I give you feedback, I'm going to get my head bitten off. So I'm not going to give you feedback. And so those are the types of tools that we have. So again, kind of turn inward, do some self-reflection, and then ask for feedback. And most people don't want to give you feedback. They may say, oh no, you're doing great, you're doing fine, but really push for the
Mhm.
criticism.
Yeah, I know one thing for me when I first started doing one on ones with my team, it was difficult to get them to give me any kind of negative feedback at all. And I thought, I'm not doing a perfect job. And I found just getting out of my office and taking walks with them would kind of open the door a little bit for those things because we weren't, it was, changing that environment to where it's not my office anymore. Now we're out, we're kind of in a neutral area. It makes it a little bit more freeing for people to talk.
Exactly. And I have this trick, or not trick really, it's more of a technique that I always say, what are two things I'm doing well? What are the two things that I can improve upon? And most times when you raise that question to your team members, they may struggle with the not doing well aspect, the criticism.
Mhm.
But if you keep asking the question and be persistent with it, over time, people will start to say, hey, you know what? Actually, in this meeting, you could have done this a little bit differently. Just, priming. And then, of course, when people give you feedback, making it safe for them to do so. not being defensive, not criticizing, not discarding it, just saying, hey, thank you. And that's all you
Yeah.
have to say.
I think that's a great idea. A great way to let them know that you're not being defensive. You're open to it. Just thank you and move on. I think that's excellent. Um, when you're getting this feedback and you're trying to figure out kind of your self-awareness, you're seeing how people see you and how you want to be seen as well, and you're building up those values and figuring that stuff out about your character. Should you document that? Should you write that down? What's that process?
Yeah, I always, and this isn't just the English major in me, who's a big believer in the process of writing, but I do think that journaling is a really, really valuable tool because just because you can think it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a clear thought or a clear idea. I find that writing is a really great clarifying medium for us, just as speaking is too. So trying to find some ways to articulate your thoughts because what you think necessarily isn't, it can seem a little bit abstract, but putting it on paper or verbalizing it can really help you again develop it. I think it's easier sometimes to reflect in a journal. So
Mhm.
it's just again, you can do it at the end of the day. That's what I tend to journal. I just kind of get clear on get clear on what went well today, what I'm most grateful for, what I need to do the next day in order to achieve whatever it is I'm setting out to achieve.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great method and a great way to do it. And also, I spend that end of the day time trying to think about things that I was grateful for that day as well. I think that's going back to that retrospective type mindset or looking back on the day.
Yeah, and I did it more so during COVID and more intentionally than ever before because I knew it was going to be a crappy time in our lives. And though I didn't realize how crappy it would be or how stressful it would be, and fortunately it wasn't as bad as I think as I was bracing myself for, it gives you this mindset that, the bigger picture, things are okay. You've got it under control. And that's part of, I think, a leader's job is really managing yourself, to be prepared to create the climate. My 10 or my 16-year-old son has his first summer job this summer, and my kids don't like it when I talk leadership to them, so I have to sneak in different ways to do this. But he was talking about his supervisor, how he was chill and just relaxed, and it really set a fun vibe for the group. And I said, I want you to pay attention to that because what would happen if he was a screamer, if he was erratic or unpredictable? And my son was like, oh, that'd be awful. I wouldn't trust him. And I'm like, exactly. Again, we all cast a vibe, and we have to be really thoughtful and mindful about the vibe that we're sharing with others because people can pick up on it really fast, especially if we are a manager or supervisor.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can use those vibes too to let so if you're always the fun loving guy, when something serious happens, and people realize that, oh, he's not as fun right now. What's going on? That can kind of really translate, let people know that this is an important moment right now. Let's focus in and tackle it.
Yeah, and I just got off the phone with a coaching client just like a couple hours ago who they're just having he leads a sales team. They're just having a really difficult time in this environment. And he's thinking very intentionally about his tone. He doesn't want to scare people, but he definitely wants to share the sense of urgency. And I think again, going back to what can we as individuals do to grow and develop our leadership skills, just being very mindful of how we show
Mhm.
up with other people.
Yeah, I've seen that too. I've had bosses that will make you think the company is completely off the rails and we need to all start looking for jobs just because we had a bad quarter. Yeah. And,
Mhm.
and in reality, it really is not that bad.
Exactly. Nobody needs, because you can't perform to your potential if you're scared. You're going to be performing from a position of, deficit or weakness. You're just not going to be able to feel free to achieve to your fullest potential. So I think, yeah, leaders must really think about the message and the method in which they deliver the message and the tone that they're using for it.
Yeah, for sure. So your book is titled Spark. Why did you guys pick that name? And what exactly does it mean to become a spark?
Yeah. So when we were working with our publisher, it was great. He's like, what you're really trying to write here is a roadmap, if you will, to bottle what go-to people at work are doing successfully to get ahead. And
Mhm.
so he's like, is there a word for that? And we just said, yeah, they're sparks. That's what we've been calling them for a really long time. They're just the people who stand out in organizations. And it's not that they were gifted with special DNA. They just have embraced a skill set, these leadership behaviors that makes them stand out, that makes them the go-to people in their environment. And so hence spark is really just, the behaviors that again make performers, ignite and change initiatives, ignite, or, anything that gets done in organizations are really done by sparks. And so, what's the roadmap for that? So, anybody can take that level of control over their career and be that high potential performer that I truly believe everybody is capable of being.
Yeah, for sure. And in that book, you talk about elements of leadership: your character, credibility, accountability, confidence, vision, service, and consistency. And some of those things come naturally to some people, and they really have to be worked on by others. When you see this, and people trying to understand what these elements are and how they need to refine and kind of develop that, because we know that leaders are you're not born as leaders. You can develop those skills as well.
Right.
What are some things when it comes to character that we need to do to refine that? To, I don't know if promote it didn't sound like the right word, but to show people that this is who we are, and define what those things are.
Great question. And like I said, but we start off with the book really focusing on your internal relationship with yourself. And character is important because it really is your integrity. If you're not who you say you're not, people can see
Mhm,
through that quite quickly and they just don't trust you. You may
mhm,
have to work with them, but you're never going to tap into someone's discretionary effort, which I define as effort people really give if they're truly connected to the people and the mission around them. And so thinking about you as a leader, your character is a manifestation of your values. Your values help you make decisions. Your values also ensure that you're living the life that you want to live intentionally. So doing that deep work is really important. And then we transition in talking about credibility.
mhm.
And this is your dependability. This is how you perform as a worker in your environment. And when I like to think about like high trust relationships, I put those two words together, character and credibility, because it's really like this magic coupling. Like you may have, John, in your career worked with somebody who had low character. They just were a savory person to be around, but they were really solid at work. They were a high performer. And maybe you've worked the other way around. So again, you could work with them, but you just don't really trust them. You wouldn't let them babysit your kids, like those kind of people.
Yeah.
And then you flip that around for a second. You work with people who are really just really good people, sound characters, but they're not high performers. So again, you want to be around them, but you wouldn't want them on your project team because they may not deliver the results. So having solid character and solid credibility is like the sweet spot because you're in the arena, right, of building trust, which is why then we transition start talking about accountability, which is how you handle problems that pop up.
Mhm.
Do you step up and own it or do you shirk it? And it's amazing. It's such an easy concept to understand. Yeah, of course we're going to be responsible. Of course we're going to be accountable. But then its lack of demonstration sometimes in our society is just mind blowing. Again, we can all understand it, but doing it is the hard part.
Yeah, I think with accountability, for me, there's two things there. I've seen some leaders that are really good about owning it and being accountable, but they're really terrible about holding other people accountable on their team. And it's like you're really good about taking the fall and backing your team and understanding that everything kind of rolls up to you as their leader. But at the end of the day, when you have someone that's not showing up for work and you're kind of just like giving them the benefit of the doubt every time, you're not holding them accountable to their own behavior. It kind of tarnishes your accountability, even though you're owning everything. So, have you seen that, and how can you maybe communicate with those leaders to help them out if they're struggling with that realm of accountability?
We think that we're doing people a favor, right, by being kind to them, being nice to them, by letting some standards slide, like,
Mhm.
oh, that's Tom, he's got a really difficult family situation, or oh, that's Mary, she's a sole income provider for her family. Like we can paint the story for why we're not going to be hard on people, and we think we're doing them a favor when in truth we're really doing them a disservice. because Tom and Mary and whoever else we want to, put a name to, they likely have pride in their performance. They probably want job security. They probably want to have a clear understanding of how they're performing in an organization. And that's the gift that we as leaders can give to them, a solid understanding. We can't always take how they're going to handle the news, but we can always control how we deliver the news to them. And so I find that most people get into a managerial role, and where they stumble the most is just giving people that clarity. You can go to a meeting and say, we're going to talk greater accountability. And everybody's like, yes, yes, we want it. But then you start holding people accountable and it's just uncomfortable. But
Yeah.
once you those, uncomfortable moments, we're getting somewhere. And I always take the belief, for me as a performer, I would rather hold myself accountable to high standards than somebody else hold me accountable to standards. And so being able to have that self candor, like, you know what, Angie, you are just not doing the job here, is better than somebody else. It's better for me to tell myself that first than for somebody to tell me that first.
Yeah, and something I've noticed, this may be a little off topic, but whenever I'm doing like annual performance reviews for people, or whenever I do my own personal annual review, because the way my company works and other companies that I've worked for is like you had to do your own self assessment first, and then your manager would do one. You kind of meet and compare it. I don't know if that works well or not, but that's kind of the process that I've seen people do. I've noticed that the really high performers are usually more critical on themselves than the mediocre and poor performers are.
I also find too, and I would agree 100%. And I also find too that the high performers have a clear understanding of the skills and behaviors that are going to allow them to get to that next level. They're very conscientious of their career development and they own it too. And that goes back to that phrase of accountability. They really own their career and they know where they're holding back. And so maybe it's a combination of greater self-awareness, greater vision for themselves, high standards, any of those things. But it all comes together that, and those are part of the things that we've written about in Spark. Like these are behaviors that anybody can demonstrate. You just have to be intentional about doing it.
So that's a great segue into what I was going to ask you about next is about being intentional and acting with intent, which is something you talk about. I think in there you have a quote. It's like small actions today could make a big difference tomorrow. And you actually mentioned this at the beginning of the conversation. You talked about how we need to be intentional with our actions to live the life that we want. What are some things that we can do to kind of take a step back and be intentional? Because I feel like, especially since COVID and working remotely, there's been like this big push of people just working, 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 and not taking the time to, take a breath and see where you're at and making those intentional steps. What are some tips that we can do to really be more intentional with our actions?
Great. No, I'm the queen of talking about incremental growth and development because I think sometimes we want something all at once and it's just not impossible. The greatest growth happens one baby step at a time. I think it is taking a step back and being very clear about the direction that you're headed. Certainly I'm a huge fan of being present and in the moment when you engage others, but you still have to lead your life. And I don't
Mhm.
think anybody wants to arrive at the end of their existence disappointed by all the things they never got to experience or try or attempt. And so that's where good intention comes in. In the way that I actually just wrote about this in one of our weekly blogs. If you go to leadstar.us, you can sign up for our newsletter and get weekly leadership, what we call them leadership moments. But I think I was talking about some of this COVID thinking hangover. Like in
Mhm.
COVID, so much about my life was getting used to disappointment or getting used to something not happening. And the other day, I just decided, like, that's done. Like, I'm over this COVID disappointment thinking. I'm going to just develop this mantra in my life. Like, everything that I want is actually going to happen. And it may not happen on my timeline, but I'm going to really stick with it and be gritty about it. And so, some of the practices is just taking a step back and being very clear about what it is you're striving to achieve. It could be, a career goal, it could be a promotion, it could be a position, it could be some element of quality of life, it could be a fitness goal, it could be financial security, like, whatever it is, being very clear and quantifying it as best as you can. And then making sure, like, every day you're doing something really small or not, like, right, if financial security is your goal, like, during your lunch break not online shopping, like, that could be a huge small thing that over time adds up. And so you just have to start with the small stuff to build the behaviors, and kind of how it sounds really geeky and rigid. And I don't think I'm too geeky or too rigid, but success happens. It's small things over time. It's building the disciplines connected to leading your life.
Yeah, well, it's okay to be a geek because I'm definitely one of those for sure. And I've seen the same thing. I think really small changes will make a big impact if you are consistent with it and continue to do those small changes. If you just say I'm gonna cut out the sodas, it'll change your life over time. It's not going to change it tomorrow. It's not going to change it next week. But if you do that for an entire year, you're going to see a difference. You're going to feel better. You're going to be you probably won't like the taste of sodas anymore. Those are some small things that you can do, and the same is true when it comes to management and leadership skills.
Exactly. 100% true. I think it's not like confidence, for example, and we write
Mhm.
about that in Spark. Where you are right now, you're not confident speaking up, or you're not confident advocating for yourself or a teammate, or if you're not confident that you're going to be able to achieve the goals, you can strategize. Like confidence is one of those skills. It's you have to play the long game. There's really no, I mean, I guess there are some quick fixes, but not really. I don't believe in fake it till you make it. I think you have to start working on the skill that you're trying to build. And when you need it, eventually it's going to be there for you. And so, starting to, like, again, if you want to be more confident, there are 4 behaviors that we've written about in Spark that will help you be more confident, but you got to get in the game.
Well, let's hear some of those because I've spoken at conferences and have done that for a while. But the last time I've spoken publicly was January 2020. So it's been quite some time since I've been in front of an audience, and I actually have a talk coming up in a few weeks at a conference called That Conference, which is a tech conference in the Midwest. And one of the things that this is will be my first time back in front of people talking about leadership and things that I'm used to talking about, but I'm a little bit nervous. My confidence is a little bit shaken because I haven't done it. I haven't exercised those muscles in a while. What are some things that I can do to kind of maybe not be as fearful when it comes to that?
Great question. Good luck. I know I miss conferences, and I'm like the same way. I have one of my first ones coming up in a few weeks, and it is kind of like, oh, this is a dusty skill that I have to prepare for. I think one of the
Exactly.
first things that you can do is experience your success, and that's just really mentally reminding yourself the last time you did whatever it is you're about to do. Stretch yourself and how you actually succeeded. So again, mentally thinking about those moments. I think for a lot of people, we struggle with experiencing our success because we're too busy achieving. And when you achieve, you blow past milestones or really significant moments. You don't file them for ready reference. So
Mhm.
having this like host of, things that you actually succeeded at that you can draw upon can mentally boost you in those moments. So just being intentional about experiencing your success. And another way to think about confidence too is surrounding yourself with positive role models. Not everybody who we're surrounded by is somebody who's positive in our life because we have very few, very limited choice on who we're surrounded by. But filtering who we let influence our powerful opinion of ourselves is really key. So again, if you're speaking in a couple of weeks, listening to the promoters, not the naysayers, and really
Mhm.
dialing in and tuning those people in to help fuel your confidence. Self-talk is another great way to develop your confidence. Again, we have so many thoughts going through our mind, but are they all serving us? Are they all advancing us? I love the Henry Ford quote, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. So positive self-appraisals helps us really get in the game. The final
Mhm.
way is managing some of these confidence killing emotions like fear, doubt, and insecurity. And, our fears can be irrational. Most of us are more afraid of swimming in the ocean than we are of getting in our car and driving, when the likelihood of getting in a car accident is far greater than being in a shark attack. So our fears are irrational. So sometimes right sizing them is appropriate. Same with worry. Like if some of the things we worry about won't, first off, we can't even do anything about, and probably aren't even going to happen. And then insecurity, I think that's when we constantly compare ourselves to other people, and we always, when we compare ourselves to other people, give them a bump up in a notch or two in their standings. It just seems impossible that we're ever going to be better than them, when really the game that we're in is just trying to be better ourselves. Like, how do we use each day to get better?
Yeah, that's really good advice, and I think surrounding yourself that you're talking about with the positive feedback from the positive people is one of the more challenging things because when I think back at the one of the talks that I gave a few years ago, I felt like I nailed it when I was up there, and I left, and lots of people came up to me and told me, excellent talk, excellent, great job, great job. And then I was reading the comments of the video that was posted, and there was one negative comment and lots of positives, lots of thumbs up, lots of positives, but one negative one that really just like stuck with me. And it was so hard for me to get over that fact that that one negative comment was there. And, even though I had all this positivity, I was just focusing on that one negative thing.
I've been there. I know exactly what you mean. And yeah, and rather than just dismiss it and saying, okay, this one person didn't didn't enjoy my presentation. Well, it gets in your
Yeah.
mind.
And there's like 500 people in the audience and one negative one. Okay.
So when we
Uh,
wrote the book Spark, there's a review out there. Again, we've got lots of reviews on Amazon, and someone wrote that it was like clear colored jello, which I thought was a brilliant like description, but it was talking about my work. Like clear flavored jello, basically. They're telling me it had nothing of substance. And I'm like, that is both genius and ouch.
yeah, absolutely.
Have to accept.
Um, so so as you're going through these steps, one of the things you talk about is to kind of being consistent. And sometimes that's a hard thing for us to do, is to be consistent in our work. And we can have a good day, we can have bad days, but how do we kind of put those good days together and be consistent and do the things that we need to do on a regular basis and kind of build that discipline?
Yeah, I think again, at the risk of not sounding too rigid, I think some of the practices and behaviors that I do and that we write about in Spark are just really useful. Like at the end of every day at work, write down a to-do list for the next day, like things that must get done. At the end of every workday, you have the greatest awareness on what needs to be done the next day. So you're doing your next day self a favor. Your next day self can show up at work, and when they get there, try to tackle the worst first, like the things that you want to do the least first. Because if you can, you just kind of get it out of your mind. Sometimes we spend so much time um, like I did this over the weekend. I had something to get done. And in my mind, it was this big monumental task. In reality, it took me 10 minutes, but it was in my mind over the weekend. And it was just so stupid. Like I know I should know better, right? I teach this stuff, but we're all human that we all fall victim to that. And I also think too, like getting a really clear view of your month ahead and what needs to happen, and also just planning key things during your week by week basis, just to make sure that you're taking time to do the strategic things that are really important to you for your success. And if you've ever wondered, like, if are you squandering time, are you wasting time, look at your calendar for the past 2 weeks and just really hold yourself accountable. Are the things that you're spending time on of most importance? And if they're not, you may have to start thinking about just making some changes.
Yeah, I love this. I love exactly like everything you're saying. I love it. And one of the, and it's really simple to do. A lot of people don't think that it's so difficult to come up with the things you're going to do tomorrow. And what if I get emails? What if what if this? What if that? But one of the things that I do is I use the reminders app on my iPhone, and I have something on there that just says today. And what I do at the end of the day, before I check out for the day, I put down three things in that list, and those are the three things I'm going to do before I open up Outlook tomorrow. So before I get distracted by emails, before I have something, pop up that's going to derail my entire day, I'm going to do these three things. And they're usually simple, like call back a vendor or follow up on something or update a document that I need to update. They're very simple things that I can usually finish before, in an hour. But having those three things makes me feel like I've accomplished something. It gets my energy going. It gets me on the right track for the day. And then what you said about the time, figuring out if you're squandering your time. One of the things that I teach part time at Winthrop University, and one of the things I make my students do every semester is to fill out a time journal, where just journal your time for 2 weeks and in half-hour increments, and just put down what you did. So that way, when you can go back, you can kind of see where you're really spending your time. Because people will say, "Oh, I don't play very many video games." Then you look on it, and they played 14 hours of video games that week. Well, that's 2 hours a day. That's quite a significant amount. If you put, half that into, put 20 minutes of that into working out, then maybe you'll be in shape. There's lots of stuff that you can do there that you can figure out just by that time journal.
That's a great practice. And I agree. And again, the goal isn't to, every minute doesn't have to be productive. But if you have priorities and you have goals and you're wondering how they're going to fit into your life, that journal is a really great practice, so to make sure that there is time for anything, and you just have to find it.
Yeah, I know when I first did it, I realized how little time I was spending with my kids. The first time it's like, oh my gosh, like I'm with my youngest like an hour a day because he's in daycare and he's taking naps and he's in bed. This sucks. Like, how can I make this better? How can I fix this?
Yeah, and it probably connected to your value. Your value system was that I wanted to be more present, for in my family. I have a family. I want to be there for them. And so yeah, it can be illuminating for sure.
Absolutely. Well, Angie, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate it. How can people find out more about the things that you're working on and pick up a copy of Spark?
Yeah, so a couple ways. First off, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to stay engaged that way. I post frequently articles I like and articles that I'm writing and working on. Also, leadstar.us. If you're interested in learning more about our business, our services, our coaching services, go there. Or like it's sparkslead.us. That's the hub for our book Spark. And there's videos, self-reflection exercises, any tool that you'd like to reflect upon a bit to grow your leadership skills can be found there.
Awesome. I really appreciate you guys putting this together. I thank you for coming on the show. And I'm, really thrilled about the success that you've had with Spark. It's an excellent book and really appreciate you guys.
Hey, thanks, John. And thanks for you doing what you're doing. This is a wonderful format for your growth and development. It's awesome.
If you enjoyed that episode, please leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. I'd greatly appreciate that. And also, don't forget to check out merch. We have some T-shirts that I've designed that are on at geekleader.com. You can click on the merchandise section there and check that out. And also, don't forget about the books from our guests. So if you like this guest and other guests that have written books, please go ahead and check that out at geekleader.com. I would greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure they would too.